20 Appalachian grandma tricks that can still cut what you spend on food, clothing, cookware, tools, and cleaning without pretending every old habit is a bargain. The question is, which ones save the most? Because making everything from scratch is not the answer. A failed jar can turn good food, fuel, labor, lids, and storage space into waste. A shirt, pan, tool, or sack of food that could have been repaired or stored properly keeps costing you again when you replace it. The old mountain ways were tested, not ignorant. But tradition is not a safety guarantee, and homemade is not automatically cheaper. I was raised in these mountains by my mama and pop, close to my grandmama, and these practices were handed down to me. We'll start in the pantry with grease, bones, beans, cornbread, and pot liquor, then move through preservation, cloth, gardens, sharing, tools, cookware, storage, and cleaning. We'll finish with what I'd keep, what I'd question, and what I'd simply buy. So first, look at what your kitchen is throwing away. A grease jar is useful only when the fat is clean. Food, bits, and water left in homemade grease can turn it rancid, bringing off flavors and spoilage. So strain it before it goes in the jar, keep it for ordinary frying or seasoning a pan, and throw it out once the smell or taste has turned. Don't save grease from some hard-used deep-fry pot and call it thrift. Then look at the rest of the meal. Sound bones, skin, and vegetable trimmings make stock for soup, stew, gravy. It gives you flavor and some gelatin from things that might have gone in the trash. It does not replace the meat, but it makes the meat you bought do another day's work. Beans, cornmeal, grits, and gravy do the same job at the table. They add bulk, protein, or fiber, so less meat can still make a filling plate. And save the pot liquor from cooked greens. That cooking broth carries flavor in some of what cooked out of the greens. Use it in the pot or under cornbread instead of pouring it down the drain. My mama, pop, and grandmama passed that along plain. Scraps are not magic. They are already paid for food. Notice for 1 week what usable fat, bones, trimmings, and cooking liquid you discard. But food kept past tonight needs a different kind of care. A jar that looks old-fashioned can become dangerous when the preservation method is wrong. Canning is only one tool. Heat sealing and acidity protect some foods. Drying removes water. Fermentation makes lactic acid. Freezing slows deterioration. And root cellaring depends on cool, humid storage. Before any canning step, remember this. Clostridium botulinum spores survive boiling water temperatures. In a sealed, low-oxygen jar, they can germinate and produce botulinum toxin, which can cause paralysis and can be fatal. Meat, poultry, fish, beans, and most vegetables must be pressure canned for shelf storage. Use a boiling water bath only for appropriate high-acid foods. A tight lid does not make an unsafe process safe. I would rather lose a batch than call a low-acid jar good because it looks right. Do not taste a questionable jar. And if you already have a reliable freezer and cheap electricity, freezing may be safer, cheaper, and less work than canning. A lot of this does sound like more work than it saves, and sometimes that is correct. Count the food, jars and lids, pressure canner, fuel, freezer space, labor, and storage before preserving every grocery bargain. Preserve what you have in quantity. The next problem is drying and fermenting, where food can look fine while the preservation conditions have failed. Drying saves food by taking away the water mold needs, but food that stays too damp can mold, and jerky or dried vegetables that are underheated or underdried can still carry living pathogens. Dry with good airflow, protect the finished food from humidity and insects, and do not keep a batch that has turned soft, moldy, or suspicious. Fermentation has its own conditions. Mold, yeasts, or spoilage bacteria can outcompete the lactic acid bacteria, bringing off flavors, gas pressure, softening, and sometimes unsafe growth. So use the right salt concentration, clean containers, a suitable temperature, and keep kraut or pickles submerged. Fermentation is low cost only when the batch stays clean and the temperature stays in range. If it spoils, the whole batch becomes a loss. Do not taste questionable food to save it. And sour milk is where an old kitchen habit gets misremembered. Souring fresh pasteurized milk or using cultured dairy can give biscuits and other recipes a buttermilk flavor. It does not make spoiled milk safe because harmful bacteria or toxins are not made harmless by souring. Fermented food is food, not medicine. I learned that patience belongs in preservation, but guessing does not. Check whether the dried food is protected from damp air and whether the vegetables stay under the brine before making a larger batch. The next method needs less equipment, but it depends more on the room itself. Root cellaring. A root cellar is not a dark closet. It is equipment made out of climate. Too cold and produce freezes. Too warm, it sprouts and rots. Too dry, it shrivels. And if pests can get in, you have stored food for them. Before you put away a crop, remember that poor temperature and humidity can freeze, sprout, dehydrate, or rot it, creating waste and attracting pests. Check the room you actually have. Feel for heat, dryness, or condensation. Look for insects and older food shoved behind newer food. Start with a small amount, separate anything bruised or damaged, and inspect it regular. If the space cannot hold steady, do not keep filling it up hoping it will turn into a cellar. Use airtight containers for dry goods. Put older food where it gets used first. That slows moisture loss, oxidation, insect trouble, and the quiet kind of waste where a bag of food is forgotten until it is no good. This is for homeowners only. Partly true. A built-in cellar favors a homeowner, but renters can still use sealed containers, refrigeration, freezer space, seasonal buying, and a pantry where the older food comes forward first. And if you already have a dependable freezer and inexpensive electricity, freezing may be cheaper, safer, and less work than trying to make a cellar out of a bad room. Storage solves food waste. Scratch cooking asks a different question. Does making the daily bread save enough to pay for the fuel and the work? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it surely does not. Biscuits and cornbread save money when the flour, cornmeal, fat, and leavening are already in your pantry and you will use them before they go stale. But a box mix or a store loaf can be cheaper once you count the oven, the time, and the ingredients bought just for one pan. Homemade is not automatically thrift. The steadier saving is in what you put beside that bread. Put beans, grits, cornmeal, gravy, and pan drippings to work, and a smaller piece of meat can carry a whole meal. You are adding filling food around the costly part instead of asking meat to do all the work. Try it with one supper you already make. Look at the meat portion, then make that same meal with beans or gravy and cornbread alongside it. If folks eat it and the ingredients get used, you have found something worth repeating. A lot of this sounds like more work than it saves. That is correct sometimes. If you buy cheap staples, have little time, or can get bread for less than your own ingredients and fuel, buy the bread. My rule is, stretch the expensive part, use the cheap staple, and quit calling labor free. Bake for the mouths at your table, not for the picture of a full pan, because food is only one kind of household waste. A weak knee in a work shirt can turn into a replacement purchase just as quick, unless a needle gets there first. A needle can stop that purchase, provided the cloth still has something left to hold. Before you mend badly worn clothing, look at the load-bearing parts. A seam that lets go in work pants, a worn shoe sole, or a failing strap can tear sudden and leave you with an abrasion or a fall. Check the knees, elbows, heels, soles, buttons, straps, and seams. Reinforce sturdy denim and work shirts early. Darn a sock while the hole is small. Replace a button before it pulls a bigger tear behind it. But if the fabric is thin all over, the seam is bonded, or a knit has pulled itself apart, quit fighting it. Replacement may cost less than the repair. I'd mend sound material. I would not trust a weak garment where its failure could hurt somebody. Cloth that is no longer fit to wear can still clean a sink, pad a quilt, or patch another piece of cloth. A quilt is sometimes sentimental more than economical. Nothing wrong with that. Just call it what it is. Before you reuse a rag, remember cloth that touched raw meat, bodily fluids, or spoiled food can spread bacteria if it is not properly washed. Keep those rags separate and launder them correctly. Take one shirt or towel and sort it. Repair, rag, or quilt cloth or replacement. And once you start saving household fat, the next question is whether turning it into soap saves anything after lye, gear, and risk are counted. Soap sounds like the perfect use for leftover fat, and sometimes it is. But the fat is only one part of the account. Lye soap making can cause severe chemical burns to skin and eyes, and fumes or splashes can injure bystanders. So before anybody mixes a batch, there needs to be a tested recipe, proper protection, ventilation, safe chemical storage, and controlled access for children and pets. Do not improvise the process, and do not treat familiar soap as proof that the ingredients are harmless. The lye changes fats and oils through a chemical reaction, and that can turn something unwanted into a useful bar. But lye costs money, So do oils, safety gear, curing time, and the supplies that keep the work controlled. A failed batch spends those inputs and leaves you with nothing usable. I don't have the setup for this, is a fair objection. Without safe storage, protective equipment, ventilation, and a tested process, soap making is not a practical saving. Commercial soap is often cheaper and safer. I respect the old skill. I count it as a conditional craft, not a default bargain. If the goal is a clean bar for the least money and trouble, buying one may be the sensible Appalachian answer. And that brings us to the garden, where land and sunlight can produce real savings, but the first costs and yearly losses can outrun the harvest. A garden saves money when it replaces food you already buy, not when it turns into a catalog of things you hope to use. Pick one produce item your household goes through, then check the plain facts: usable light, water, space, a legal place to grow, and whether you can store or cook what comes in. Count the seed, tools, fencing, water, losses, and your time before you build a bigger patch. A first-year garden can eat its own savings in a hurry. My strongest advice is grow less, use it all, and learn that crop before buying more equipment. A garden that grows food nobody eats is a very attractive way to manufacture compost. This is for homeowners only. Partly so. Renters may not have ground for beds, a cellar, or permission for fencing, but containers may be allowed, and buying produce in its local season, cooking it, freezing it, or saving suitable seed can still fit a rented place. Housing rules and local law decide the rest. Save seed mainly from open pollinated plants. Many hybrids do not breed true, so the next plant may not give you what you saved from. And seasonal food can cost less when it is abundant, though imported produce and hard grocery competition can narrow that difference. Start with one legal crop you will eat. Then comes wild food and neighbor trade, where cheap can become costly if the plant, place, or arrangement is wrong. Foraging can lower a grocery bill, but only when the food, the place, and the permission are right. Foraged plants can be misidentified or contaminated by pesticides, heavy metals, road runoff, or animal waste. Wild mushrooms are especially high risk because an edible species and a toxic one can look much alike. So do not eat an uncertain specimen. Gather only what you can positively identify from an uncontaminated site where collecting is legal and the plant is abundant enough that taking some will not strip the patch. That last part matters to the money. If the walk, identification time, transport, and legal limits take more than the food is worth, the saving may be small or gone. Foraging is not free food by definition, and sharing is another old household economy. Surplus beans, garden produce, labor, or a useful skill can replace a purchase when both sides trust the arrangement and the exchange is clear. But if you are thinking, that may be illegal where I live, you are right to check. Foraging land, barter, home canned food sales, and related exchanges can be restricted by local rules. Verify before collecting, selling, or trading. Otherwise, use a legal household practice instead. The old economy worked because people knew what they had, what they could offer, and what rules held the place together. The next savings come from the things that keep working for years: cookware, tools, and storage. A cast iron pan can earn its keep for decades, but leaving it wet or unseasoned causes rust, and chipped enamel leaves a surface that is hard to clean safely. Dry, sound cast iron and maintain it. The upfront cost and upkeep can exceed cheap nonstick, so the saving comes over years. A dull knife, axe, hoe, or pruner may need sharpening, not replacement. Sharpen only when the handle, head, and metal are sound. Repair or replace a cracked, loose, or failed tool. Store food airtight, control temperature, and use older food first to slow moisture loss, insects, oxidation, and microbial growth. Vinegar must not be mixed with bleach or other cleaners. Acidification can release toxic chlorine gas. Baking soda and vinegar make foam, but foam is not sanitation. Use them for scale, light grime, abrasion, and odors. Use proper disinfection for bathrooms, food prep contamination, or illness control. Wash reusable containers and rags properly if they touched raw meat, bodily fluids, or spoiled food. I would rather maintain a sound tool than replace it, but convenience may win. Check one item for rust, a dull edge, poor storage, or contamination, then choose maintenance or replacement. In I tested 7 Appalachian survival tricks, here's what still works, I test which methods still hold up. Keep paid for things useful, and let failed things go. Which of these old tricks still works when you test it against modern time, cost, and safety? Tell me the one you would actually use. The next video is, I tested 7 Appalachian survival tricks. Here's what still works, where I put those methods outside the ideal household conditions and separate what still performs from what only sounds good in a story. Until then, keep one useful thing in service before you buy another.